worked on it from 2006 to 2009. Cold cases are tough, especially ones like these, because so much work had already been done. I didn't know anything about him other than what was in the headlines and in the media. You know, I knew that obviously Biggie had been killed in Los Angeles, and that murder had a lot of controversy surrounding it. Of course, I knew of Tupac and the fact that he had been murdered in Las Vegas. You know, the shooters are dead, and the shooters had been dead for years. But there's other co-conspirators, at least. You know, you've got Suge Knight was a co-conspirator on the murder of Biggie, and you had Keefe D, who was a co-conspirator in the murder of Tupac. But because of
BIGGIE SMALLS. Salutare și bine v-am regăsit la un nou interviu exclusiv și în premieră pentru România. Alături de mine se află Greg Kading, detectivul Departamentului de Poliție din Los Angeles, cel care a investigat și a pus punct dosarelor de crimă ale lui Tupac și Biggie Smalls. Cu cât încercăm să aflăm mai multe și să citim mai multe despre cele două cazuri, ne dăm seama că este o poveste fără de sfârșit. Greg, thank you for joining me, and it's an honor talking to you. I'm so happy that you accepted this invitation so we can finally find out what exactly happened with Tupac and Biggie in 96 and 97. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Great to meet you.
So before we start, can you tell us a little about your background and how did you start working on those huge cases?
So I'm a retired detective with the Los Angeles Police Department, and I was a homicide detective, and I had been asked to look into Biggie Smalls' murder case because, you know, it had gone unsolved for years, and there was a big lawsuit that was going on regarding it in the city of Los Angeles. And I had a lot of backgrounds in gang investigations and narcotic investigations. So all those areas that they thought might have something to do with these, both Tupac and Biggie's murders. So I was kind of a natural fit into being part of that investigative team. And ultimately there ended up being like 16 of us all working together from different agencies. But it was a huge effort, and we worked on it from 2006 to 2009 until we ended up getting confessions in both of the murder cases.
Awesome. And what was your motivation accepting those cases? Because I think there's a lot of work, and being a cold cases, both of them actually, a lot of conspiracies about it. What was your motivation, and how hard it is to work with cold cases?
Well, the motivation was just the challenge of it, you know, the challenge of knowing that these things hadn't been solved. There was a lot of pressure to try to figure out what happened, especially in Biggie's case, because that was Los Angeles Police Department's responsibility to investigate. Tupac was Las Vegas's, you know, investigative responsibility. But there's a lot of pressure, and as an investigator, you want to challenge yourself. And so if they haven't been able to figure it out, then, you know, on a personal level, you want to take on that challenge and seeing if you can make some, you know, continued effort in it. But cold cases are tough, especially ones like these, because so much work had already been done. Like, they really did a lot of work.
And a lot of conspiracies. If you just Google Tupac or Biggie, you'll find a lot of stories of what happened. Do you actually look into those as well?
Well, all of the ones that are plausible, you know, you can't look into them all. Some of them that are just ridiculous, you don't spend a lot of time and energy running down those. Like, you know, we really didn't spend a lot of time investigating whether Tupac was still alive or not, just because, you know, the evidence was so contrary to that. But the ones that potentially could be true, the ones that made some sense, we spent a lot of time, and you treat it like anything else. You approach it kind of with the scientific method. You build a hypothesis, and then you try to disprove it. And if you can disprove it, then you know that it's the wrong theory. So that's what we did. And, you know, we went down 3 or 4 different investigative efforts, and finally came up with the conclusions that we ended up drawing.
I was always passionate about Tupac and Biggie. I was curious to find out about their life. Were you a fan of their music or a fan of rap music before? What did you know about them? when you started to work on those cases?
I didn't know anything about him other than what was in the headlines and in the media. You know, I knew that obviously Biggie had been killed in Los Angeles, and that murder had a lot of controversy surrounding it. Of course, I knew of Tupac and the fact that he had been murdered in Las Vegas. But really, that was it. I'm not a fan of rap music. I didn't listen to rap music. I'm an old rock and roll guy. So hip hop and rap was not the genre of music that I, spent my time listening to. But once I got involved in their cases, I needed to learn about those genres of music and the cultures around them. So I learned to appreciate it, but it was as an investigator, not as a music fan.
Exactly. And it's curious to see how much reality is in their lyrics and in their words. It's actually their life that actually happened with those tragic events. So here we are, two big record labels, one on West Coast, one on East Coast, one managed by Suge Knight and the other one managed by P. Diddy, Puff Daddy. How dangerous were those guys back then?
Well, really what made Suge Knight dangerous was the people that he associated with. The people around Suge were very dangerous guys. They were all convicted murderers and gang members and very, hardcore street people. Not so much with Puffy. Puffy was more into the current the music scene of the day and more
business side.
Yeah, he wasn't as much of a street type of person as Suge Knight and the people that he's associated with. So I didn't see he wasn't on that same level of public danger. Okay,
and Tupac was with Suge Knight. On the other side, Biggie was with Puff Daddy. Now, let's start with Tupac. Was Suge Knight a father figure for Tupac?
Maybe big brother, father figure, mentor. All of those things may, be reasonable type of, relationship scenarios. Tupac, after he left New York, he was looking for a place where he could belong. He felt like the people in New York had betrayed him. He felt threatened out there for good reason. And so he came and got under the wing of Suge Knight and felt more safe and comfortable. And so Suge was, kind of like an older brother figure to him.
He was just a kid when he moved to Los Angeles. Here we are, 1996, September. He was in Las Vegas to attend Mike Tyson's fight with his crew. Can you walk us a little bit through the events that happened that night?
Yeah, Suge Knight and his entourage and other members of Death Row Records, including Tupac Shakur, had all gone out to watch the fight. It's a very common thing to do with people in Los Angeles is to drive to Las Vegas to watch professional boxing events, especially Mike Tyson, because these guys were such fans of his. Well, the Southside Crips, the individuals that were kind of affiliated themselves with Bad Boy Records, they were also out there because they were Mike Tyson fans and boxing, fans. And so now you have these two different, factions that are already at odds with one another, all in the same place at the same time. And that's when Tupac Shakur looked across the lobby of the MGM and he saw Orlando Anderson. And one of the guys that Tupac was with, a guy named Trayvon Lane, who's a gang member from Compton, told Tupac, "Hey, there's that guy right across the lobby there who stole my Death Row medallion just a few months ago." So Tupac took it upon himself to run over there and sucker punch a guy named Orlando Anderson, and that set a whole chain of events in motion. After Tupac sucker punched Orlando, the rest of the entourage, including Trayvon Lane and Suge Knight and other members of the Mob Piru, they started to stomp this Orlando Anderson kid out. Well, that was a fatal mistake, especially for Tupac, because this kid that they just stomped out was a stone cold killer.
So was the medallion the key factor and the main reason why the fight started that night and that led to Tupac's killing?
Yeah, for the medallion was directly related to that assault that took place that night. But there was already a bunch of bad blood going on between these guys. There was already previous fights and shootings. And so this was just another stepping stone in this ongoing type of conflict between them.
Is there any connection between Orlando Anderson and his crew and P. Diddy? A lot of rumors about it.
Yeah, so when P. Diddy was having problems with Suge Knight and Suge was threatening Diddy and other members of Bad Boy, as was Tupac. Of course, all you have to do is hit him up, and you can get kind of a flavor for the kind of animosity that was going on between these guys.
And one other thing I'd like to say, any artist out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record, dancing, come to Death Row.
Sean Combs decided that, well, I've got these enemies in Los Angeles. They're Suge Knight and Blood gang members. He had a close friend in New York named Zip, and Zip knew these Crips in Compton that could provide security for Puffy and other members of Bad Boy when they were out in Los Angeles. So that was what Puffy decided to do. He's like, hey, Suge Knight has gang members. I might as well get some of my own who are the natural enemies of Suge's people. And then, that's who he's going to use as one of his layers of, defense, one of his layers of protection.
Is there any evidence that Puff Daddy paid those guys somehow?
Bad Boy Entertainment had actually hired Crips for security work out on the West Coast. Is that true?
We've never hired
DJ Cotton,
Crips or any other gang faction to do security for us.
Well, according to Keefe D, when we interviewed him, he says, they weren't getting paid like, paychecks. And it was really just come hang out, be part of these video shoots, be part, there's girls all over, just be part of the, just come hang out. And, but of course, they understood what their role was, is to kind of also be on the lookout for anybody that might be showing up and creating problems or threatening anybody. So it was really more like, like
free passes to certain events.
Exactly.
And
passes to concerts and events and
fights.
Yep, exactly.
So that's why there's no investigation. There was no investigation done on Puff Daddy because there was no money evidence. There was no evidence that this guy actually paid them, right?
Well, there was some, according to Keefe D. Now, because you had asked whether they were getting paid for security.
Exactly.
But now there was also this kind of agreement where Puffy had asked Keefe D to go take care of Tupac and Suge because he was first. And so there was a discussion about money, very vague discussion about money. And according to Keefe D, he learned from this individual Zip that Puffy did pay part of this agreement. But Zip kept the money. He never forwarded it to Keefe D like he was supposed to. So, that's according to Keefe D. I believe it's probably true, especially if you understand the nature of this guy Zip, who was in the middle of it all. So yeah, there was probably some payment. But to your point, you said there was no investigation. There was an investigation. When you go talk to Puffy Combs, he doesn't have to talk to you. He doesn't have to admit to anything. He can just say, talk to my lawyers. I don't want to cooperate. And so there's an effort to talk to him, but if he decides that he doesn't want to cooperate, then there's nothing you can do about it. So that's why and that was the problem with both of these cases, is that you were dealing with gang members and people from the streets that lived by a certain code. And that code was, do not cooperate with the cops. Don't talk to them about what you know or what happened.
And no snitches and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why the investigations really they never got to the point where anybody could be arrested or prosecuted, just because that gang culture doesn't cooperate with law enforcement investigations.
You mentioned the name of Keefe D. This guy was Orlando Anderson's uncle, the guy that was beat up by Tupac at MGM. So what happened when they were walking to 662 Club of Suge Knight after the fight? What exactly happened from your understanding?
Well, after the fight at the MGM casino, after Orlando Anderson was beat up, the cops showed up, they separated everybody. And then, of course, Suge Knight and Tupac and all that entourage, they just got the hell out of there. As a matter of fact, if you ever watch that video, you can see them just kind of marching out of the casino. They ended up going back over to Suge's house in Las Vegas, and then they all loaded up in their cars and started to go to Suge's nightclub, which was called Club 662. Which is where Tupac was supposed to perform that night. Mike Tyson was supposed to make an appearance. It was going to be
like a big event, yeah.
A big event. Well, of course, the Crips knew about that. They knew where everybody's going to be, so they jumped in their own cars and started to head over there. And just coincidentally, they run into the caravan of vehicles with Suge Knight and Tupac, and they have a gun and they pull up alongside, and Orlando Anderson leans out the window and just starts shooting and shoots and kills Tupac, or ultimately kills him 6 days later.
And Keefe D was in the same car with Orlando Anderson, right?
Right.
Okay, is it right that they find out that Tupac is at the intersection of Flamingo? They heard some girls screaming and saying Tupac, and that's draw their attention, and they stopped. They pulled next to Tupac, and that's how they shot him.
Yeah, so actually the Crips, Keefe D and Orlando and two other guys that were in this white Cadillac, they were going the opposite direction down the street, and they heard girls and everybody was yelling. And of course, there's this long caravan of cars of Suge Knight and Don
security guards and
yeah, the whole entourage, members of the Outlaws, security guards, bodyguards, Tupac, Suge, and as these Crip gang members are going down the street and they look, across the lane. They see, oh shit, they're right there. So they just do a U-turn and they pull up alongside and look into the cars, and they finally get alongside where Tupac's sitting on the right front passenger seat of the BMW. He was an easy target.
But there was no confession until when? No confession from Keefe D until when? When did he say that Orlando Anderson shot Tupac?
Not until 2009. So we knew that Keefe D was a person of interest, and that he'd been interviewed on it before and said that he didn't know anything. We ultimately decided we were going to take a different approach, where we were going to build this big drug case against him because we knew he was dealing PCP and cocaine. So we spent 3 months doing a drug investigation of him until we got to the point where we knew we could put him away for the rest of his life. And we made an offer to him. We said, you can sit down and cooperate with us and tell us what you know, or we'll see you later. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. And him and his attorney decided to cooperate.
So his answer was Orlando Anderson. He's the one that shot Tupac.
Yeah, he handed the gun to his nephew who was in the backseat, Orlando.
He handed the gun. Wow, okay.
Yeah, so Keefe D had the gun. He was in the front seat. Of course, the driver is to his left, and the vehicle that Tupac's in is on the left side. So he hands it over to Orlando in the back seat, and Orlando just takes it, leans out the window, and starts shooting.
And what happened with Orlando Anderson?
He ended up dying in 1998. He was involved in an unrelated drug deal. In 1998, he went over to collect some money from a couple guys, and a shootout happened. Orlando was shot and killed, and then two of the other guys were shot and killed. And there was one surviving suspect.
I remember in the early years after the event, he was questioned a lot. He even has a couple interviews online with him talking about the event of Tupac murder. It was hard for police to put him away, right? Because there was no clear evidence about it.
Right. There's no eyewitnesses that were willing to testify against him.
Well, so nothing about the girls that saw the event, nothing about the people that were on that night in that intersection. Nobody confessed anything?
Yeah, the girls that were there, they described what they saw, but of course they didn't know who Keefe D was or any of these guys were. They just say, hey, we got caught in the middle of this shootout, and we saw a car go this way and a car go that way, and that's the extent of their testimonial value. They couldn't identify anybody, so it wasn't like they were able to identify Keefe D or Orlando Anderson or anybody else. So
years, 3 months, and 29 days. Today, my son was murdered. 1 year later,
1997, almost identical case when Biggie got shot. It's actually almost identical the way I see it. Suge was in prison. Was he paying somebody for this murder? Was he ordering this murder?
Yeah, he ordered the murder from jail. He wasn't in prison yet. He was in jail. And he had his girlfriend, one of his baby mamas, go out and hire a blood gang member that Suge knew would go out and do that type of thing for him, and offered him money. So that guy agreed to do it, and showed up that night that Biggie was at the Peterson Auto Museum, sat outside in his car and waited. And then when Biggie and Puffy and the rest of the crew left, he pulled up alongside, very, like you said, very, very similar to what happened to Tupac in Las Vegas. He just shoots into the car and hits Biggie multiple times and kills him.
Was this like a revenge? Do you think this would have happened if Tupac wasn't dead?
It probably would not have happened if Tupac wasn't dead. It was a retaliation for that.
And tell me about, I'll get back to P. Diddy. How dangerous was he back then? I know I've read somewhere that he called you a liar. Can you tell us why?
Well, of course, because I published a book, explaining his role in all of this, and what else is he going to say? If he says he agrees with me, then all he's done is confess to being a murderer. So, of course he's going to say I'm lying, because what other alternative does he have? And
we're talking about, sorry for interrupting you, we're talking about murder rap book, right? And we'll have it here on the screen. People can order it online.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, of course, he's got to do something with these allegations, and so of course he's going to say, yeah, this is just a bunch of bullshit. But it is what it is. You've got witnesses that whose testimony has been corroborated, but you can't really expect him to confess.
So, who exactly killed Biggie Smalls?
Biggie was killed by a guy named Wardell Faust. He was a gang member from Compton. He's a friend of Suge Knight's. He was wanted in other murders at the time. He was just a hardcore gang member who wouldn't hesitate, especially if you pay him money, to go out and shoot somebody.
And as well, what happened with this guy?
He ended up getting shot 10 times in the back in 2002. He was riding his motorcycle up the street, and some people came up from behind him and shot him with a semi-automatic rifle and killed him.
And obviously, that's why those cases could never be officially closed, because those guys are dead, and there's nothing else to do. Or can those cases ever be closed?
Well, the shooters are dead, and the shooters had been dead for years. But there's other co-conspirators, at least. You've got Suge Knight was a co-conspirator on the murder of Biggie, and you had Keefe D, who was a co-conspirator in the murder of Tupac. But because of so much time has passed and so many people have died and so many witnesses are gone, there's no practical way to prosecute these anymore. They'll never go to court, ever. So you just have to settle for the fact that there's street justice occurred. The killers got killed in the same exact violent ways that they killed Biggie and Tupac. So, that's almost like perfect justice. It just depends on how you look at it.
I know Suge Knight is in prison right now for a murder that he committed a couple years ago. Was he prosecuted for Biggie's murder as well, or?
No, he was never prosecuted. Like I said, nobody will ever be prosecuted on either Tupac or Biggie's. Suge's in jail for manslaughter because he ran over and killed somebody in a parking lot in Compton.
Okay, I know Biggie Smalls' mother filed a lawsuit against Los Angeles police. Was that the main reason why Los Angeles police reopened the cases?
Yeah, it was one of the motivating factors. 10 years had gone by. There was this pending lawsuit. And so the police department said, hey, let's get a new group of people who have never investigated this case and just get a renewed effort in trying to solve this thing. And that's when me and the rest of the team got involved.
And are you allowed to talk freely about those events? Like, how come you're allowed to talk about it? When there's no investigation, I know it's hard to obtain information and stuff like that.
Well, I'm retired. I retired in 2010. So after I retired, I don't have any obligation to abide by the policies of the police department because I don't work for them anymore. If I were still on the job, then it would be a problem. I'd be prohibited from talking about unsolved cases. But since I don't work for the police department, then I have the right to talk about anything I want.
Okay, we know about the Netflix Unsolved series, 10 episodes, I guess. Did you work with them for those series?
I did. I was one of the executive producers on it, and I got to work on it and be part of that whole production.
Is this the most realistic videos about those murder cases that we'll ever see?
Well, most of what you see in that series is based on facts. However, there's some creative license that takes place just because it's Hollywood and they've got to tell a story and keep a narrative. So there's some parts of this story that are, kind of fabricated. But the elements about what happened with the murders, how it all went down, that's all true to form. That's all accurate historically. But when you do a Hollywood production, producers are going to make some slight changes in order to keep the story more interesting.
And you also created the murder rap movie, which I recommend to everybody to watch it. How what's the difference between those two movies? Let's go like that.
Well, one's a scripted television series, and the other one's a non-scripted documentary. So they're just different styles of television. You got a documentary, tries to keep things a little bit more historically accurate, and then you've got a television series that uses actors and script writers and all of the different things that go into a fictional series or a non-fictional series.
Is your book published in Romania? Can people find it in Romania?
It's on Amazon. It's not in the Romanian language, as far as I know. If I were gonna recommend somebody I would recommend watching the actual documentary versus reading the book, because in the documentary you get to hear the audio tapes of the people talking about what they saw and what they did, and you hear Kifidi's confession. You don't really get that from a book.
As last words, I want to ask you those two questions that bother people for a lot of years. Can you tell us exactly who murdered Tupac and who murdered Biggie Smalls? So we can be done with it.
You absolutely can put all your eggs in this basket. And as Tupac Shakur was killed by Orlando Anderson, the same individual that he had gotten into a fight with earlier that night. Orlando and his uncle hunted Tupac down and Suge, and Orlando killed Tupac, period. Now, with Biggie's murder, it was a retaliation for that. And so Suge Knight hired a gang member named Wardell Faust to go out and retaliate and shoot Biggie, which he did the night that Biggie was at the Peterson Auto Museum in Los Angeles. So, and both of those killers are dead. And that's where all the evidence points, and you can set aside all these wild conspiracy theories because they're never ending, but there's no facts or evidence to actually back them up.
What do you know about Romania? Just like last words. Can you say hi to Romanian people, or have you ever encountered any Romanian problems at work?
I have never had any Romanian problems at work. I don't know much about it. I remember growing up as a kid and there being this famous gymnast from Romania.
Nadia Comaneci?
When I was younger, and of course she really put Romania on the map as far as that Olympic period went. But I've never been there, so maybe one day I'll get there on my travels, because I've been all over Europe, but I haven't made it over into your neck of the woods yet.
But now I'm happy that we heard it from you, not from different sources, and hopefully this is gonna be like an end story, at least for Romania. So thank you very much for accepting my invitation, and we'll keep in touch.
Hey, anytime you come to Los Angeles, you get out to Southern California, look me up. I'd love to have you over for dinner and show you around.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg.
You're very welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.